In 1996, Capcom was already on fire, being one of the most established and iconic companies in the world of gaming. And I mean, how could you not be with games such as Mega Man and Street Fighter? But they said that wasn't enough and decided to dip their tiny little toes into the world of survival horror. And damn it, those bastards did it again, creating one of the most important video game franchises of all time: Resident Evil. This series pushed the genre of survival horror into the stratosphere not once, not twice, but I would argue at least 3 times. It wasn't the first to do it, some would say it's not even the best to do it, but it certainly was the one that took it the furthest. Now look, before we get into this, I have something I have to get off my chest. I lied to you. I have played Resident Evil before.
Fuck you, bud.
Wait, before you click off. No, come back.
the hell?
You're coming back here. Come on. Stick around for a minute. Alright, so hear me out. So technically, I have played these games before. I played the remake of the original Resident Evil on the GameCube when I was a kid, but I'm an idiot now, so you go ahead and do the work. Imagine how stupid little kid me was. A little bit later, I watched my neighbor play various sections of Resident Evil 4, but that doesn't really count because it was only just a little bit. And then years later, when I was like 12, I played Resident Evil 5 for the first time and beat it like 10 times in a row. And then finally, I played Resident Evil 7 with a roommate a few years ago when we were going through our horror phase. So yes, I have played some of the games, but it stops there. I just had this love for this series that I was never really able to explore until I finally convinced my girlfriend to play all the remakes and then 7 and 8 with me. And then she decided to call it quits. The Resident Evil journey. I kept going. After that, I played through every game in the mainline series, all 10 of them, including the remakes and the originals. So I've been pondering the best way to do this, whether I should just go over the whole overarching story, which is kind of wishy-washy anyways, or if I should just talk about every game, give them my pros and cons of each one, and then maybe rank them at the end. And I finally decided that I'm just gonna do a mix of those two ideas. Either way, I decided I'm gonna try to be concise and not dive too deep into all the story details, unless I think it's important to the overall narrative of the entire saga. And that's because I'm probably already gonna have to split this into a 2-part video so it doesn't take me 6 months to get this out there. Also, nobody wants to watch this guy talk about anything for like 3 hours straight. With that being said, in this video, we're going to talk about the first 3 games and then 0 and Code Veronica, which I think are probably going to be the most important to Requiem anyways, considering these are the ones that take place in Raccoon City. And then in part 2, we'll talk about Resident Evil 4 and onward and probably get to Requiem as well. Anyway, enough of that crap. Let's just get right into it. Resident Evil 1996. This game actually takes place in 1998 and kicks off the whole crazy people / zombie infested universe that somehow never ends in catastrophic, world-destroying, widespread viral infection. Everybody already knows this, but in this game you can choose between Jill Valentine, whose story is accompanied by Barry Burton, or Chris Boulder-punching Redfield, who's accompanied by STARS Bravo team's very own Rebecca Chambers. All 4 of those people are members of the STARS branch of the Raccoon City Police Department, which are essentially just super badass cops. The story starts stating that there had been reports of cannibals in the Arclay Mountains, so STARS Bravo team was sent out to investigate, which unfortunately does not go well for them. And so because Bravo team sucks at their job, Alpha team has to come in and get the damn situation under control. Alpha team is led by Albert Wesker, and you're gonna want to remember that name, which you probably already know that name because it's Wesker, but just for the sake of this video, maybe pretend like you don't know. And the rest of the team consists of some of the most beloved names in gaming, including the aforementioned Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, and Barry Burton, alongside Brad Vickers, which we only see his appearance like one time in the series. These guys land in the Arclay Mountains to investigate and are very soon chased inside the iconic mansion by a group of deadly dogs. That could be that sounds like a hot dog restaurant or something. One that you might not want to go to because it's deadly dogs. But now, before we get too far into the mansion here, for time's sake, I'm going to talk about the remake and the original at the same time and kind of compare them as we go, just so it doesn't take me, 20 hours to talk about each game individually. And I just wanted to mention that real quick because I think the original Resident Evil here takes the cake for iconic introductions. I mean, they hired real people to act for like 2 minutes worth of cutscenes in the entire game. And I love it. It's cheesy and perfect. I'm glad that they did that so I can laugh at it now, 30 years later. No matter which version you play, you end up in the same place. And in both games, I chose Jill in my first playthrough, which means that when you get to the mansion, somehow Chris is missing and you're tasked to investigate for clues and find out what happened to him. And obviously vice versa if you chose Chris. I just have to say right off the bat, I didn't play the 1996 version of this game until literally a few weeks before writing the script. And with no nostalgic attachment to this version of the game, it can be rough to get through at times, especially when you can just play the 2002 remake's 2015 remaster. Yeah, there's some hilariously iconic lines, like when Wesker tells you not to leave the mansion.
Stop it! Don't open that door!
And when Barry says that Jill almost became a Jill sandwich.
Oh, Barry!
That was too close. You were almost a Jill sandwich.
You're right.
But by the end of the game, I was just starting to feel fatigued. I love PS1 era games, but I think especially playing these games 30 years later, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 Nemesis just have a much more defined art style that pleases my eyes personally. And between that and the really rough voice acting, it was pretty hard for me to get invested in the original release. And I'm sorry, and I don't mean to offend anybody who loves that game dearly, because it was fun, I enjoyed it. However, I think that the GameCube version of this game is a near perfect gaming experience for me. I love almost everything about this game. I think that the voice acting's pretty rough, but it's a 24-year-old game, and it's much better than the original release. And graphically, this game holds up so well. I think it looks better than a large chunk of games that come out today. I found myself entirely immersed in this game when I was playing through it. I even ended up loving the tank controls and the fixed camera angles, which is something that I want to give credit to the original release too. Every single shot in these games serves a purpose. Whether the purpose is to terrify you or to make you think, holy shit, this is beautiful, they nail it every time. The developers successfully took control of my emotions on my entire playthrough of this game. And I love that. Anyways, geez, sorry. Back to the story. Very early on, while you're investigating the mansion, this scene plays when you enter one of the rooms. This scene is engraved in my brain. Now again, I played this game when I was a kid and I made it maybe a couple hours, but my brain was too stupid to get very far, so I gave up. But that has never left. But so we find out that this whole mansion is infested with zombies, and they're infected with a virus called the T virus, also known as the Tyrant virus. No matter which version of this game you're playing, you're informed while exploring the caves underneath the mansion by Bravo Team's captain, Enrico Marini, that there's a traitor amongst you, and now it's your job to figure out who it is. Immediately after telling you the truth, Enrico gets murdered, and instead of doing anything about it, Jill just stands there and watches while the shooter gets away. I just want to say at this point, I don't feel very secure about the STARS program that they got at the Raccoon City Police Department. Now, with this reveal, you realize that Barry's been acting suspicious the whole game, and it's not just a product of bad voice acting, and eventually in the remake, he turns his gun on you. But, you know, you immediately forgive him and give him his gun back, and he helps you fight that horrible beast, Lisa Trevor. At the end of the game, you start exploring this lab that's owned by Umbrella, which is a pharmaceutical company based in Raccoon City. This is where Chris or Jill is locked up, depending on which game you're playing. And at the very end of this section, you find out that Wesker was the one who's truly pulling the strings. And he was the one who threatened Barry's family's safety, which is why Barry was acting suspicious the whole time. But as we all know, Barry's a good guy, and he says, you know what? I'm not gonna let this happen. So he double crosses Wesker with you, which causes Wesker to release the first tyrant in this series, T-002. Obviously, the main crew defeats the tyrant and Wesker slips away like the slippery little bastard he is. And nobody really knows which one's the canon ending. I don't think there really is one, because whether you beat the game with Jill or Chris, you never have everybody on the helicopter when you're leaving. The biggest story beat that the remake adds to the game is the inclusion of Lisa Trevor, who is a sad girl that you guys referred to as horrid earlier. You assholes. She has a horrific story that she carries with her as she follows you through the cabin in the woods and in the caves beneath the mansion. And like a lot of the meat and potatoes of this story, it's told through files that you find scattered throughout the mansion and lab. Long story short, Lisa's story is important to the whole canon for reasons that we're going to get to very soon. Overall, the music and the atmosphere of the original Resident Evil, especially the remake, are top notch. Some of the best I've ever experienced in gaming. I think anybody who has any interest in this series should do themselves a favor and play this game. Or if you're just a fan of horror in general. Putting this on a ranked list, I'm gonna say it easily fits on top. No great series goes without a sequel that can rival the impact of the first, besides Zelda. But they more than made up for the atrocity that is Zelda 2 with later entries. Resident Evil 2 is a prime example of how you raise the stakes of the first game without losing its identity. Fan favorite Leon S. Kennedy was born in 1998. Well, he was 21 then, but you know. On his way into work, he stops at a gas station and runs into a lady named Claire Redfield. Yep, that's right, this dude's sister, who was also on the way to Raccoon City to find Chris. The two decide to team up and venture into the city together, and on the way they have possibly the most inconvenient series of events I've ever seen happen. A truck driver from outside the city was bitten by a rogue zombie, followed their car all the way into the city somehow, crashes into the back of the police car, blowing up and successfully separating the two protagonists. Similar to the first game, depending on which character you choose, you get your own side, mini-playable character that moves their story forward. In Leon's story, we have the introduction to the series' most iconic anti-hero, Ada Wong, and in Claire's we get Sherry Birkin, the daughter of two Umbrella scientists. Now, a unique part of the original Resident Evil 2 is the order that you play this game in actually matters, unlike the original Resident Evil or even the Resident Evil 2 remake. The original has a mechanic called the zapping system, so when you make a decision such as taking the extra inventory slot here, or the submachine gun, when you get to the same point in scenario B, those items are either going to be there or be gone depending on what you chose. There's a few other examples of this, like when you get to the lab, you need to scan Leon and Claire to get into his secret room. I love this system, and it's probably my favorite part of the original Resident Evil 2. Well, and the fact that there's like entire areas in the B scenario that just are not in the remake. And the original game plays out fairly differently depending on which combination you play. So if you play as Claire A and Leon B, you're going to get an entirely different story than if you play Leon A and Claire B. Overall, the story in both games is essentially the same, but now this may be blasphemy. I vastly prefer how it's told in the remake. Now, go ahead, type your evil message. Tell me how dumb I am. No matter if you're playing the original or the remake, you start the same way, in the Raccoon City Police Precinct. And this is just as iconic as the mansion in the first game, if not even possibly more iconic now. Essentially, you get there and you find out pretty quick that the police station is overrun by zombies, just like in the first game, infected with the T virus. Your goal is either to find Claire or Leon, depending who you chose, and any other survivors. The remake is just so much more of a slow burn. Everything is just much more nuanced, and it takes a while to piece everything together. In both versions of the game, you slowly make your way through the precinct until you find a secret passage. In the remake, upon your first escape, you run into a half-scientist, half-monster who you have to have an awesome, dope boss fight with. We don't know who he is quite yet, but we're getting there. But in the original, you fight like a monster here. In both games, shortly after this, you find yourself in the parking garage where you meet your side character, either Ada or Sherry. At this point, you're still left in the dark. In the remake, Ada tells you that she's an FBI agent, and in the original, she tells you that she's looking for her boyfriend, John. On Claire's side, Sherry gets kidnapped by this evil, evil man, whose story we're gonna get into in just a little bit, so let's be patient, why don't we? Now, after some puzzle solving and each character's respective story shenanigans, you find yourself outside of RPD, and you enter the sewer system of Raccoon City. And this is where the original takes any sort of nuance and just throws it out the window. You meet this woman named Annette Birkin who just dumps the entire story onto you. She tells you that her husband, William Birkin, yep, these are Sharon. Her name's Sherry. Yep, Sherry's parents created something called the G virus. Now, if you'll remember from a few moments ago, when I mentioned the addition of Lisa Trevor in the Resident Evil 1 remake, well, our guy William Birkin here made some discoveries from the experiments done on Lisa Trevor, which caused her to become immortal and disfigured and just completely grotesque, as you guys said. Seriously, shame on you. These discoveries are what led to the creation of the G virus, which is supposed to evolve or enhance whomever the host is. But obviously, we know that this is a stupid ass plan because in the entire history of pop culture, we've never seen anything like this work. I don't think even one time. The best example of the effects of the G virus is through William Birkin himself. The first time we see him, you can tell that he's still in there, but the virus is slowly taking over his brain, and he has all but lost his humanity. As we progress through the story, you see him become more and more monster-like. Now in the remake, I really like how both the Claire and Leon storylines progress with their side characters, because again, it feels much more nuanced. Nuanced is not a new word I learned for this video, by the way. I don't know why I keep using that. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it's still really silly how fast Leon falls in love with Ada, but I mean, this is the source material, so you can't really expand it too much without just making an entirely different game. I think I really like the change of Ada posing as an FBI agent, just looking for the G virus, trying to find answers about what's going on, with the true intention of selling it off for big bucks or whatever, which is also her intention in the original, but in the original, she's searching for her boyfriend John, which is the umbrella scientist that we read about in Resident Evil 1, which his password for his computer is Ada in that game. And when I found that out, I was like, what? That's crazy. I don't know, I'm a sucker for foreshadowing like that, even though they probably didn't have Ada really in mind when they made the first game, but whatever. So actually, now that I'm saying all that out loud, maybe I don't like this change as much. Either way, Leon goes full simp mode over Ada, and like I said, it just doesn't really make much sense because he's known her for a grand total of 10 minutes in both games. But in the original, it makes me feel more like, what the fuck is wrong with you? What, like, how? Stop this. Like in this scene when Leon is confronted by Annette, who is also comically evil in this game. Like, she's mad at you for killing this guy because it's her husband, but look at him. Anyway, she tells Leon that Ada is a spy working for a company called The Agency, which I don't know if is ever expanded upon in the series, but his reaction to finding out that she's a spy is like, no, I know Ada, and she would never do that.
She specifically got close to John and became his girlfriend to get information about Umbrella.
That can't be. I know her.
And it's like, dude, you don't know her, you just met her. And the first time that you guys met, she shot a real gun with real bullets at you. Granted, after her death, if you inspect her gun in the original game, it tells you that the gun was empty, which means she had no intention of killing Leon, and maybe she did have these feelings for him too, and maybe they do just work together. And I mean, how could you not? Just look at him. Isn't it crazy that 30 years ago, people genuinely thought that video games would never look better than this? I mean, I still love it. The art style's timeless to me, but I don't know, it's just funny to think about where we're at now. I honestly love how cheesy the original games are. Obviously, that's part of the charm of Resident Evil as a whole. But in these early games, I can't tell how intentional the cheesy campiness really is. Unlike the newer games where they obviously are fully embracing it. I do completely understand why some fans would prefer the original and its campiness, because in the remake, I feel like they stripped some of that back, which I like, but it's not going to work for everybody. Now on Claire's side of things, the big story section with Sherry comes with her own evil, despicable man, the Chief of Police, Brian Irons. Throughout the original game, there are notes describing how evil Chief Irons is and was before the outbreak. But when we meet him ourselves, he's like an Austin Powers villain. He even like swivels around in a chair. He should honestly have a tiny little cat with him. I think that would have suited him well, actually. He's pretty much immediately killed off by William, which I love. I think it's cool that he just is built up to be this evil, despicable man and is just sliced in half just like that. But on the other hand, despite what I've seen online, I think the orphanage is a great addition to the remake. This place is creepy as fuck, dude. I was on the edge of my damn seat when this guy smashes through the door with an axe, the Shining style. And he gets to meet his end in a much more graphic and satisfying way. To me, at least. After all that crap, in both games, it's revealed that Sherry's infected with the G virus because her dad's a mega asshole and injected her with the virus. But a distinct difference is, in the original, this only happens if you play Claire's campaign first, which is why the Claire A, Leon B is considered canon. In the remake, it doesn't matter which one you play first, Sherry's always going to be infected. In the original RE2, whoever you play as first encounters William, and that's like your boss throughout the whole game, and the character that you choose for the B scenario has to go up against the tyrant model T-003, the infamous man himself, Mr. X. Now, Mr. X is one of 6 tyrant models deployed on a Raccoon City during the outbreak. And in the original game, he only shows up in the B scenario, which I had no idea until I played it for the first time. Whereas in the remake, he is very prevalent throughout both scenarios of the game. Mr. X in the remake is just perfect. He is the best stalker enemy in any game that I've ever played. And I keep saying that like really dramatically about a lot of things in this series, but that just goes to show, and we're only on game 2, but that just goes to show how important this game series is and how well it does and everything it tries to do. You know, obviously with the whole premise of this video, I didn't play the original games, and part of that is because I was a literal baby when they came out. So I have no idea if Mr. X was the icon that he is today when the original Resident Evil 2 came out. I can only read what people were saying on GameFAQs, like 15 years ago. But what I do know is Mr. X in the remake made a damn statement. He's easily the best part of the gameplay aspects of the remake. The absolute dread I would feel in the pit of my stomach when I would hear this dude's loud ass stompers marching all over the RPD. And lucky for me, once you get to the sewer section, he's essentially gone for the rest of the game, minus a couple run-ins here and there. And a few boss fights, including at the end of the scenario, where in true Resident Evil fashion, you get to blow him up with a freaking bazooka. The story wraps up essentially the same in each game. Sherry is cured from her disease. In the remake, Annette says it's completely gone, but in Resident Evil 6, she still has some of the G virus in her, which makes her have like healing powers and stuff. No matter who you choose for the A scenario, Leon, Claire, and Sherry all meet up at the end. And once you complete the B scenario, you kill William for good and escape Raccoon City. Now this game is different than Resident Evil 1 for me because I probably wouldn't recommend that game to anybody unless they were a die-hard fan of the series and just wanted to see how it all began. Because I truly think that the remake is the pinnacle experience for that story. With Resident Evil 2, I think the original game is just as good, if not better, than the remake. They're completely different experiences and offer you a totally different range of emotions. The original has a few jump scares, but the remake is just terrifying for the first half of the game. It was just dreadful and hard to get through, but in a good way. But the original, I was just excited to get back to whenever I wasn't playing it. It just felt so much cozier and easier to digest. I also think the 1998 version of this story holds up graphically and artistically. I love the colors of this game. It's all visually so appealing to me. And both Leon and Claire look so charming in their original forms. At the end of the day, I think Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 2, both versions, are the prime example of what the horror side of Resident Evil should be, which is one of the things I'm really excited to see how Requiem handles. I hope that it's somewhat similar to these two games in that way. But that's not out yet, and we have more games to talk about, and so here's where I'm gonna rank Resident Evil 2. This one's tough because both of these games are dramatically different, and when you're talking about them side by side, comparing them, I don't even really know where to start. When just getting into the series, I had only ever really heard people talk about how the remake took so much character and just content out of the original Resident Evil 3, and I thought I was crazy because I played the remake first, and while going through it, I thought it was fun. I enjoyed pretty much every minute of it, even though it was pretty short. But despite that, I thought the content that was there was really, really good and solid. But then I played the original and I understood what everyone was talking about. Both games start loosely the same way. We start off with our collective fan favorite, Jill Valentine. And shit has gone down in Raccoon City. And we already knew that because we played Resident Evil 2, and this game takes place before and after Resident Evil 2, so. In the original game, you start off in front of Jill's apartment, and there's a bunch of nearby zombies you gotta take care of. Where in the remake, the game starts you off facing Nemesis, which completely just takes away any build-up or hype when he's finally revealed. Now, when I first played this game, I thought this was really dope. I thought it was cool that it starts off with your apartment getting destroyed and this big fucking dude's chasing after you. I thought it was intense, and overall, I love Nemesis, so I was like, hell yeah. But then I played the original and I realized this sucks. I mean, the game's called Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, for God's sake. There should be this build-up to the guy that's on the case of the game. In the early sections of the original game, you're like, where the hell is this guy? When's he gonna pop out? But anyway, after the chase scene with Nemesis, you end up in a similar spot as you start in the original, in the streets of Raccoon City. The areas you explore are somewhat similar, but I like how it is in the original because it's like, it feels much more open, where in the remake, you have these designated spots that you know you're supposed to go to, so you just quickly go from A to B. And while you're doing that, you have a decent amount of run-ins with Nemesis, but you just run through like 2 or 3 doors and he stops chasing you, which isn't so different from the original once we get there. Early on in both versions of the game, you run into Brad Vickers, who's the pilot from the first game that saves you from the mansion, and abandons you in the beginning, but he came back, so I guess we're all cool. Brad warns you about the Nemesis, who again in the original we haven't seen yet, so he's just building up all this aura like, who is this guy? I want to see him. In the original, the first main objective is to get to the RPD. That's right, you're going back. Once you get to the RPD, you watch as Nemesis kills Brad, and this is amazing because this establishes that Nemesis is a real threat. He's actually going to kill possibly main characters. In the remake, you don't even go to the RPD as Jill, so you don't see any of this, and again, There's no real threat established, other than, you know, him destroying your home, but I mean, it's Resident Evil, it's bound to happen no matter who it is. Now, one thing that the original does here that I wish was in the remake is give you decisions to make. So right here, you have the option to flee or fight. If you flee, Nemesis chases you through the RPD, but if you fight him, he's down, and then you don't see him again until after you're leaving the RPD. But the thing is when Nemesis chases you in the PS1 version of this game, this dude is fast. Even in 2025, I would clench my damn cheeks when Nemesis would show up. Now, this may ruffle some feathers, but I actually thought that Nemesis was fine overall in the remake. I mean, he can't really be like Mr. X where he chases you throughout the whole city because he's just too fast, and he gets a damn bazooka eventually, and it just wouldn't even really be fun. It'd be more annoying than anything. Unless they dumbed him down, but again, he's Nemesis. He shouldn't really be dumbed down. I don't know. I think it's a hard battle for Capcom to win with how they handled Nemesis. And I also understand why they don't really give you a choice, because you just make the damn decision. You can either run away from him or you fight him when you see him. You didn't really need like a little prompt to show up to say, will you fight or flee? But yeah, overall, for the first half of the game, I thought he was fine until he turns into a dog, and then it's just like, what the hell? Where did this even come from? Why is he a dog now? Nemesis doesn't do any of that in the original until the very end of the game, but he doesn't transform into a dog. So again, it gets kind of convoluted when talking about both these games because they're pretty much entirely different games outside of the same characters and some major story beats. But something like how you get to the RPD really early on with Jill in the original game, that doesn't happen until about halfway through the remake, and it doesn't even happen with Jill, it happens with Carlos. Oh yeah, Carlos. That's the second playable character in this game. He's this mercenary dude who's working for the Umbrella Countermeasure Security... What is it? He's working for the Umbrella Biohazard Countermeasure Service. I had to cheat for that one. In the original game, he's super forgettable. It's hard to even recognize him as the same character in the remake. Like, he's fine in the original, but in the remake, they make him like an actual likable character. And it's not just because he's handsome, which he is. I think Jill not being the one to go back to the RPD is really stupid. It makes way more sense for her to be the one that's there. And now Carlos is the one who sees Brad dead. That has no emotional impact to Carlos whatsoever, which then translates to having no emotional impact to you or me, the players. And completely disallows Nemesis from getting any more evil aura. They throw in a liquor in the RPD, which is cool, but it kind of just feels like, hey, we made this for the Resident Evil 2 remake, let's just toss these back in the Resident Evil 3 remake too, even though they weren't in the original. And that's one of the things about Resident Evil I like when the games have these enemies that are only in that game, they make them feel much more impactful. Like if we saw the regenerators from Resident Evil 4 scattered all the way throughout Resident Evil, they would be like way less cool. But now they're like my favorite enemies in the whole series. One of the consistent plot points between these two games is Carlos's two comrades, these two Russian guys. One of them is named Nikolai, the other one's Mikhail, because of course they are. Nikolai is just another comically evil villain, but this time he's Russian. And I'm about it. I think it's cool, whatever. In the remake, you meet these guys in the subway, and in the original, you find them on a tram car. It's a minute difference, but I don't know why they did it. After some gameplay bullcrap happens, in both games, you get the cars moving. And unfortunately, Mikhail's story ends the same in both games. You knew him for like 1 second, but that doesn't stop this dude from being a real one, and he sacrifices himself and slows down Nemesis so you can escape. This is where you go to the RPD in the remake, and in the original, you go to the ever so talked about clock tower. This is just one of the key locations missing in the remake. And I thought the clock tower was gonna be a lot longer from how people would talk about it online, but it was actually pretty short. I thought it was really dope, but I was expecting so much more because people would talk about it so much. You fight Nemesis here, and this is roughly the same spot where he turns into a dog in the remake, and in both versions, he infects you here. In the original, after you're infected, you take over as Carlos for the first time. You go to the hospital, which is a very, very short section as well, and you find a cure for Jill. In the remake, once Jill gets infected, you take over Carlos again, and you go to the same hospital, but the hospital is way bigger and is actually a pretty sizable chunk of the game. Not that I mean, this game's like 6 hours long, so it's you know, a sizable chunk is like 30 minutes. But after the hospital segment and finding a cure for Jill, these games have like absolutely zero similarities. They are just totally different games. In the original, you go to this graveyard / park area, and I love this area. I think it's one of the coolest areas in the game. The only thing I don't like is the giant worm boss fight here. But then right after that, you go to another iconic area, the Dead Factory, these are both missing from the remake, and I think it's a real shame. And I think it's a shame because in Resident Evil, usually the last area, I think, is like the weakest area, but in Resident Evil 3, I think it's the strongest. In the remake, you do this whole whole like warehouse maze that Nikolai set up for you, but yet again it takes like 1 second to do because Jill's not in the 3rd grade. And then right after doing the maze, you end up in another brightly lit, white-walled, generic lab that you've seen in like probably a dozen science fiction movies and games. And it's fine in Resident Evil 2, but that one is way cooler than the one in Resident Evil 3. Well, the remake. And then sure, there's like a puzzle you have to do, and you can see how the tyrants and hunters are made, and I think that's dope. But the source material, Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, did the hard part for you. It gave you the factory of the dead. That's so raw. But anyways, in both games it ends with a Nemesis fight, which in the remake I think is really cool. It kind of feels like a Dark Souls fight, which I'm not gonna complain about that. And instead of the iconic rocket launcher, you use a freaking rail gun to cut him in half, which again, that's dope. Hell yeah. In the original, Nemesis kills off Nikolai here like he's a fly swatter, and Nikolai's a damn Russian fly. But in the remake, Jill and Carlos have one final battle with Nikolai. Not that you play it or anything, but you watch them have one more battle. And of course, because he's an evil bastard, he destroys the vaccine, and then Jill and Carlos get on the helicopter that was sent to save them, and they leave Nikolai on the roof, where he dies in a fiery explosion. No matter which game you play, they end the same way. You watch as Raccoon City gets completely annihilated by a giant bomb. Which I don't know how they're going to answer that. They probably won't, because the lore in Resident Evil, like I said at the beginning of the video, is kind of wishy-washy. But yeah, I'm curious to see what Raccoon City looks like in the new game, considering what we just watched. So, like I said, I liked playing the Resident Evil 3 remake when I didn't know what I was missing. Yeah, the game is fun, and I'm probably still going to enjoy it when I play it again in the future, but the original was superior in almost every way. Really, the only thing about the remake I like more than the original is, as a GameCube and onward gamer, the third-person shooter gameplay I just prefer over the fixed camera and tank controls, which I like in the original games, but what can I say, I'm under the age of 35. And no offense, I love my gamer friends who are over the age of 35, but look, I occasionally play Fortnite, alright? Sorry. So I enjoy the actual gameplay of the remake more than the original, and also both Carlos and Jill are really likable characters, and I love how they're rewritten in the remake. I, and many others, just can't help but to wonder, if the remake stayed true to the original vision of Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, I think we could have had the best game in the entire series, but they took too many shortcuts and left turns, and just cut amazing areas. So instead, it falls flat a little bit. I mean, I guess it kind of falls flat a lot because it's just an entirely different, it just misses the entire second half of the game, really. With that being said though, I do think, and this is my personal opinion, so don't get mad at me and I won't get mad at you, but I think that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis is worth, I almost said worthless, but it's not worthless, it's a good game. I do think that Resident Evil 3 Nemesis ranks below Resident Evil 1 Remake and both versions of Resident Evil 2, but is better than the original Resident Evil. And at the end of the day, it's Resident Evil, and in their mainline series, I don't think they make bad games. So I still loved it overall, but it's just, there was some moments where I was starting to feel bored and just kind of ready for it to be over. And specifically, this would happen in the beginning of the game. I think that the backtracking that happens in Resident Evil 3 is just a little egregious. And obviously there's backtracking in the mansion and RPD, but the way that the mansion and RPD open up as you're exploring is done masterfully. I love how it's done. I really wish the remake included more puzzles as well, because that's like part of Resident Evil's identity, and there were no puzzles really in the Resident Evil 3 remake. And it's kind of a thing lacking in future games too, but we're not there yet. I also think that Nemesis is the coolest tyrant in terms of design, but gameplay mechanic wise, Mr. X is just, I mean, you can't beat that. But you know, I still love Nemesis. I think he's a cool guy to hang out with when you're exploring the city. I had no idea the importance of Code Veronica until I started studying which games were considered mainline in this series. Up until about like a year ago, I had no idea it even existed. So I had really no idea what I was getting myself into when I booted this game up. I just kind of assumed it would be like another fixed camera angle, tank control, classic Resident Evil game. And it pretty much is. But we'll get to that soon when we're talking about the gameplay. First, let's go over the story. This game opens up with one of the protagonists from Resident Evil 2, Claire Redfield. And we find her right in the midst of a Mission Impossible-esque sequence. Which, I just want to say real quick, I feel like a lot of people say that this game got way over the top with action starting with Resident Evil 4. And, I mean, just look at this. How is this not like a like I just compared it to, a Tom Cruise-like action sequence. I feel like there are a lot of cutscenes in this game that could fit in right with Resident Evil 6, and that's saying something to a lot of people. And that's okay with me, because I love the cheesy, campy, over-the-top action part of Resident Evil just as much as I love the survival horror parts of it. So Claire finds herself in Paris, and she's trying to locate her brother Chris Redfield, which Chris went to Europe to take down the European branch of Umbrella, which is in Paris. So Claire follows suit, and she goes to Paris, and while she's there, she gets captured by Umbrella and sent to a desolate, zombie-infested prison on an island called Rockfort Island. Here she meets a prison guard named Rodrigo, and he's nice enough to let her free, and now she has the goal of getting off the island. While exploring the island, she meets her sidekick, Steve Burnside, and my god, this might be the most annoying character in all of Resident Evil, in the mainline series at least. Steve was also locked up on this island, and now they have the common goal of getting out of there. The two of them split up because Steve just can't handle, I guess, teaming up with Claire. Shortly after meeting Steve, Claire stumbles upon a palace that's owned by the Ashford family. The first of the Ashford family that we meet is one by the name of Alfred. And you know what, I'll give it to this guy. He's at the height of evil Resident Evil villains. I mean, just take a listen for like 2 seconds.
Welcome, Claire. Consider the area you are in a special playground I have prepared just for you. I so want to enjoy this.
Alfred makes mention of his twin sister Alexia, but we find out pretty quickly that Alexia is not real, and it's actually just Alfred dressing up as Alexia and doing a funny voice, because something's wrong with him. This reveal is funny, but truthfully, while playing this game, sometimes I felt like I was in a Saturday morning cartoon. And fairly soon after our introduction with Alfred, we meet another iconic Resident Evil villain, Albert Wesker. What the hell is he doing here? Wesker is revealed to be the secondary villain of this game, and it's also his second game in the whole series. It's crazy how iconic Wesker became when he's really not in that many of the Resident Evil games. And a couple of the ones that he is in are the least played games, besides the one, which is the most sold Resident Evil game of all time, but this is also the game that gave birth to his Neo look and his superhuman powers, which is badass. After some battles with a few BOWs, a giant worm, and exploring an underwater base, Claire and Steve eventually get off Rockfort Island, but not without a fight with their very own tyrant, T-078. Claire has her first run-in with this dude on her way to the airplane that Steve's about to pilot off the island. Once Claire and Steve take off, we see that Alfred has his own Harrier jet and apparently is a master pilot, and he chases after them. When they're in the sky, the two protagonists find out they're not alone, and Claire goes and investigates just to find the tyrant's still alive and now on the airplane somehow. This fight is infamous with the Resident Evil community because if you don't have enough ammo or heals at this point, you're just fucked. I mean, I wasn't, because I read about it online, you know, like 20 years later. And also I'm somebody who has like 15 different save slots. But for a normal person who doesn't save like 15 different times, they gotta start the whole game over if they don't have enough ammo here. And this fight's brutal. I mean, he chases you down and he smacks you around like you're nothing. So anyways, after you finally restart the game, get back to where you were, kill this guy because you're prepared this time, the plane's autopilot kicks in, and now it's flying you to a secret base in the Antarctic. The people in Resident Evil have the worst luck ever. Like, this sucks. And of course, this base is also owned by Umbrella, because those evil bastards are everywhere, nowhere safe from Umbrella. Here we see a bunch of zombies, moths, and giant spiders, because in the early Resident Evil games, you couldn't go without a giant spider. But most importantly, we run into this guy. This is the father of Alfred, Alexander Ashford, or at this point, known as Nosferatu. And eventually, while we're here, we run back into Alfred because he followed us in his Harrier jet I was talking about earlier. But Steve does this hilariously stupid action movie maneuver and shoots Alfred at point blank range, which doesn't kill him, it just knocks him over the edge, which then the edge falls beneath him and then he falls into the abyss. But whatever, it's classic video game, this is allowed back then. At this point, because Alfred fell in the abyss, we can only assume he's dead. Now when the duo tries to escape the Umbrella base, we get this scene of Nosferatu breaking free, and now we know that Claire's gotta give him the beatdown. And what do you know it, look who's walking up the stairs. After a couple shots to the chest from our sniper, We gotta save Steve because he's a useless piece of garbage and can't do anything himself. I hate this guy. After saving him, the two of them try to get away in this snow truck thing. But while driving away, we see that of course Alfred's not dead, and surprise, Alexia's real. This was actually a really cool reveal. I thought that Alfred was just a crazy guy, but it turns out he is a crazy guy. But crazy within reason, I suppose. The first thing Alexia does is be a giant douche and stops us from getting away. Now here he comes. Yep, the entire second half of the game, we play as Chris Redfield, the man himself. Which, hell yeah, I'm not gonna complain about that. Now because this game takes place in 1998, Leon must have faxed Chris the wrong info and sent him to the wrong island. Chris is now at Rockford Island where he runs into Rodrigo too. Rodrigo is the one who has to tell Chris that he's a moron and went to the wrong place. And then immediately afterwards gets engulfed by that giant worm from earlier. While we go through the island for the second time, we see this scene where Wesker, unbeknownst to Chris, is watching him. I also really like how they obscure Wesker's face here as if we haven't already seen him at this point in the game. Wesker then sends some hunters after Chris because hunters at this point in the series were like essential to be in the game, besides Resident Evil 2. Once Chris returns to this room later in the game, Wesker confronts him face to face, mano y mano. The important part here is now Chris knows that Wesker is still alive. And like I said earlier, this does take place in 1998, so that's in the same year as the original Resident Evil. Dude, what a crazy ass year for all the people involved in the Raccoon City outbreak. Wesker reveals that he was just there for Alexia, but now he has a little bonus because Chris showed up. Chris and Wesker get in a little wrestling match here, and just as Wesker lets out his evil laugh to indicate that he has won the battle, Alexia shows up and out-evil laughs him. Which causes Wesker to go freak out mode and throw Chris to the side. I don't really know why Wesker would have spared him here. They don't elaborate on it, but Chris is alive, so hell yeah, we get to keep playing the game. After some BOW battling, Chris finds his own Harrier jet, which he takes to fly to the Antarctic to find Claire finally. Through some notes here, we learn how important the Ashford family really is. Now, I have gone through this entire video without mentioning a single thing about a dude named Oswell E. Spencer. And that's because, well, up until this point, canonically, he wasn't mentioned a single time in any of the mainline games. And I'm saying that like it's a big shock because it is a big shock for me. And maybe that's because the first game I really played was a future one where they do mention him, but I had thought at this point Spencer was like the guy behind everything that we've known about since the start. Spencer is a co-founder of Umbrella with Edward Ashford, which is Alfred Ashford's grandpa or grandfather, but well, I don't know how that works because they were made in a lab and not organically, but so anyways, the Ashford family and the Spencer family are the ones responsible for Umbrella. Spencer himself is the one whose mansion we explore in the first game, which that mansion was built by a dude named George Trevor. That's right, Lisa Trevor's father. Good for you, man, you're keeping up. I appreciate that about you. I waited this long to talk about this because I thought this was truly insane. Like I said, I thought all of this was known, but it's really not until this point. And this isn't even like it is a mainline game, but it's not one of the games that if I'm asking some random dude in the street, hey, have you played Code Veronica? I would assume that they'd probably be like, what even is that? I just thought this was insane because Spencer, lore-wise, is probably the most important villain in the entire saga. As Chris, we continue searching for Claire and we stumble upon a very familiar mansion, which I don't know if this is the copy of the Spencer mansion or vice versa, but it's cool to see either way. I love a good callback. We find Claire tied up behind the staircase and soon after we take back control of her, but only very briefly. While going through the mansion, we find out that Alexia and Alfred were made from the DNA of their ancestor, Veronica, hence the name of the game. We run into our ally Steve here, but unfortunately for him, he was injected with the T Veronica virus and turned into an evil monster. He very briefly tries to kill Claire, but then through the power of love, I guess, he stops and decides to spare her life. He then reverts back to his humanoid form and he actually tells Claire that he loves her, and I know we really sped through the story of this game, but at no point in the game did it really feel like there was a shared love between them. Immediately after confessing his love to her, he just dies, and I think it's supposed to probably be sad. The music's great here, but I just hated Steve's character so much that I didn't feel anything. Sorry for any Steve lovers out there, but I had no sympathy from this guy. Claire gets stuck in this room and then boom, We're playing as Chris again. Hell yeah. Here, Alexia and Wesker have a face-off, and it's kind of dope. We learn that Alexia is the only living person with the T Veronica virus, which I'm pretty sure that's what Steve had. I could be wrong about that, and if I am, I'm sorry, lore masters, but I do know for sure Alexia has the T Veronica virus, which is a special evolved form of the T virus from what I can understand. It's only in this game, so I don't know. Naturally, Wesker wants this because he's super evil and he wants to become a god. The two of them start fighting, but then Wesker notices Chris and asks him to take over, and Chris is like, sure, why not? But either way, this is our first fight with Alexia, and it's pretty dope. I like this boss fight. Chris puts her down, and we continue searching the mansion until eventually we find the room that Claire is stuck in. She passes a little key under the door, and this key is the key that initiates the self-destruct in the building, because every Resident Evil building has a self-destruct button. We have to find the secret panel that initiates the self-destruct and then put in a password. And can you guess what the code is? Because it's Veronica. I had no idea. As the building's about to blow, we have our final run-in with Alexia, and we do a boss fight that I think fucking sucks. I hate this boss fight. You have to shoot the flying form of Alexia out of the sky, and you have an infinite plasma gun thing, but it's just a pain in the ass to aim. And maybe I just suck at video games, which I do actually. I'll admit I'm not the world's best gamer or anything, but I think that this boss fight is possibly my least favorite boss fight at the end of a Resident Evil game. After killing Alexia, we have a final run-in with Wesker, and we don't even get to fight him. We watch a cutscene where him and Chris have like a small little duel, and then like an explosion or something separates them, and they have their last little face-off for the time being. I really like that it sets up this rivalry between the two of them, which we've already kind of had. I wish we could have fought Wesker one time in this game, but it builds anticipation, especially since the rest of the games are out and we know what's happening in the future. And then just like that, Claire and Chris escape in the Harrier jet that Chris found on the island, on Rockford Island, and it's game over. That's the end of Code Veronica. All right, I feel like I talked about the lore in Code Veronica more than any other game so far that we've talked about, but it has more lore than the first 3 games in the series, I think, at least outwardly. The notes might have more lore in between the first 3 games, but this one, it like spoon feeds it to you, and I can appreciate that as part of the 50% reading below, like a 6th grade level or whatever the statistic is. But man, dude, the voice acting in this game, it like completely just took me out of it. And I know it's like a 25-year-old game, and I'm not gonna fault it for that, because I mean, any game from this era, the voice acting is probably gonna suck, right? But that's where I feel like Resident Evil 1, 2, and 3 did well, is there wasn't that much voice acting, so there was less that you had to endure with it. Code Veronica, they're yapping to you left and right, and it's just like, especially Steve and Alfred, I was pretty fed up. Alfred's a hilarious character, but I think I was over it by the time he died. And I think that's part of the charm, and I love that, and I was laughing throughout the entire playthrough, but it did make it hard to get through at certain points. This is the only one where I took like a month-long break in between when I started and when I finished. And there's only one other game in the series where I did something similar, and that's not in this video, and maybe someone will be able to guess which one it is. And the gameplay is great. It's just an evolved version of the fixed camera style we had in the first 3 games, but this time the camera kind of follows you around rather than having like static shots. But the static shots, I think, allowed for more artistic backdrops. So really that can be a positive or a negative, depending on how you feel about the backdrops of the first 3 games. It's more similar to Silent Hill 2, and probably the rest of them too, I don't know, I haven't played them yet, than it is Resident Evil, which I think is cool. They do unfortunately make it really easy to fuck yourself over, like I was saying, like with the tyrant fight on the plane. Or if you don't give Chris enough items when the switch happens, then once again you're fucked. But that's kind of a moot point in 2026 or whatever year you're watching this in, because the game's 25, 26 years old. You can just look it up. Or if you're a fan enough of the series to know about Code Veronica, you've probably heard about it at this point. And like I said, another complaint is I think that this final boss is my least favorite in the series, so that's unfortunate. I love the tyrant fight overall, even though it can be a royal pain in the ass. I always love a good tyrant fight. Overall though, the music's great in this game, as per usual. It's very PS2 era coded, which I really appreciate. It has a really cozy vibe that's really prevalent in the early Resident Evil games, which I love. I do think that the first half of the game is stronger than the second half of the game. I kind of got bored once I got to the Antarctic. Like I said, I took a month-long break once I got there. But I am super excited to see if we get a Code Veronica remake, because I think this game could be one of my favorites if it's done right. A proper remake could really do this game justice. It could make Steve not so cringy and maybe give us more screen time with Wesker, because everybody loves that. And he's like the main face of Resident Evil bad guys, and if they're going to continue remaking all the numbered titles, I think they should remake this game to really hammer home the relationship between him and Chris. I really don't know what the overall consensus is between the fans on where Code Veronica ranks, so I don't know if this is going to piss people off, but I'm going to put Code Veronica right below the original Resident Evil 1, because I think this game doesn't suck, but it's probably among my least favorite Resident Evil titles, unfortunately. Alright, now that I've properly pissed some of you guys off, Resident Evil 0. I love this game. I'm gonna just say that straight up right now. This game fucking rocks. I love it. This is the final game in the classic Resident Evil era, and I think it's a perfect note for the classic era to end. This one released in the same year as the Resident Evil 1 remake on the GameCube, which I didn't know that. I thought this was the true pinnacle first Resident Evil experience, and it wasn't until I was like 15 that I realized that I was completely wrong. Not that it mattered, because I didn't play any of the games until like a decade later, so. Resident Evil 0's opening cinematic starts with a shot of the iconic train that we all know and love from this game. As it's blazing through the forest, we see this generic Final Fantasy villain summon a bunch of leeches to attack the train. We watch the attack start, and then boom, we transition to the STARS helicopter. Now we get to finally see what really happened to STARS Bravo team the night before the mansion incident. Something caused their helicopter's engine to malfunction, so they had to make an emergency landing. Once they land, they find an MP vehicle flipped upside down and the people inside dead. They then find a report that states they had a prisoner named Billy Cohen, and he's an extremely dangerous dude who's on the loose now. So Bravo team's captain, Enrico, from the first game, remember him? He tells the team to split up and find Billy. That's when our perspective switches to Rebecca Chambers, and we follow her as she stumbles upon a train, the same train that we just saw. This is where our journey begins. Pretty much right after getting on the train, we get attacked by zombies. We kill them, run away, do whatever, and very shortly after that, we have our first run-in with Billy Cohen. You just know when someone's rocking that tribal tattoo that they're probably a freaking badass. Billy tries to tell Rebecca like, hey, we should team up, there's a bunch of freaks on this train. And Rebecca just threatens to shoot him, but then lets him walk away, which I guess makes sense. I mean, he's like this big dude, again, with a super badass tattoo. I probably wouldn't. I'd be like, whoa, you know, if I ran into him. After walking to the other side of the train, we run into him again. And at this point, he's like, dude, come on, please, let's just team up. We can't do this alone. Rebecca ignores him, continues upstairs where she runs into this leech humanoid monster guy. Rebecca tries to run away, and she almost dies from the leech monster. Then Billy, the badass he is, jumps in to save the day. Hey buddy, we're in the midst of filming something right now. Oh my, I don't even know what the hell's going on, do you? Well, all these lights. After Billy saves Rebecca, she's like, okay, maybe he's not such a bad guy. And this is where the main mechanic of the game is introduced, the character swapping. A lot of people really dislike this mechanic, especially in combination with the fact that there's no item boxes scattered throughout the game, and each character only has 6 slots to spare. I'm gonna say right now, I love this aspect of the game. I think it's sweet. So if you're a #1 Resident Evil 0 hater, then you've come to the wrong place. Not really, we just have different opinions, but if you think Resident Evil 0 sucks, I would love to hear it if you've made it this far in the video. The train starts moving, and this unlikely duo needs to figure out why. After some puzzles and gameplay crap we don't need to get into right now, we find out Umbrella's military guys started moving the train. But the leech eggs that are scattered all over the train start hatching, and they kill the guards. In this same cinematic where the guards die, we get a scene with Albert Wesker and William Birkin. And this is when I fell in love with the game. I was like, oh, hell yeah, I've heard about these two guys forever. I had no idea that they even knew each other existed, but come to find out they're like best bros. I love a good bro relationship. It's just called bromance, that's what people say. I just think it's really cool to see Birkin not in his mutated Resident Evil 2 form. And as far as I know, besides like maybe some spin-off games, this is the only time we see that. Eventually, we figure out how to stop the train, and it crashes anyways, but luckily, they're Resident Evil protagonists, so they don't die from the crash. Our two characters are placed right in front of the training facility, which is where the train was heading anyways, with a bunch of Umbrella employees. When Billy and Rebecca enter this building, which is identical to the Spencer mansion from the first game, obviously, we learn about James Marcus, the third founder of Umbrella, alongside Spencer and Ashford. It then cuts to Wesker and Birkin, who are confronted by the mysterious Final Fantasy guy. He tells them right away that he's the one who leaked the virus in the mansion and the train, and then he sings them a nice little song. And I'll say right now, this villain sucks. I hate this villain. Although I love this game, I think that as a villain, he's probably the worst in the series. And I know I was just complaining about Alexia, but I think her boss fight sucks, but her as a villain, I don't think is that bad. Through the notes that we pick up exploring this familiar place, it's not, I don't think it's a mansion, we find out that James and Spencer find the progenitor virus, which over the course of months, James founded the T virus with the progenitor virus as the base. This freaks Spencer out because he doesn't want James to take over as the head of Umbrella, so Spencer has him killed by a group of assassins. See, I've seen complaints about Resident Evil 0, like it adds nothing to the lore, but I think that this is the most lore building we've had between this and Code Veronica in the whole series in the first half. I love this stuff. I think it just makes it more interesting for a guy like me. And I love that we get to watch it firsthand. Like after I finish grinding out this video, I'm probably going to play through Resident Evil 1 and 2 again just because it adds more backbone, I guess. While going through the training facility, we get our first glimpse of the mutated bugs and animals, like the leech guys or this giant centipede, and angry apes, which the apes are called eliminators, and these really piss people off. Because if you get caught up in a group of eliminators, they just stun lock the shit out of you. And I do think it's annoying, but it's like in 2 or 3 rooms in the entire game, and then you never see them again, so I don't really think it's that big of a deal. And unfortunately, I like them. We tune into the Wesker and Birkin storyline one final time, where they clearly know the true identity of this great value Final Fantasy villain, and they all but say who it is. At the end of this, Wesker alludes to him leaving Umbrella and doing his own thing, which we know from future titles works out for the guy. So honestly, Wesker should be an inspiration to you guys. Quit your job, do something new. Be like Wesker. This is the last time we see them interact in the game, but it makes sense because Wesker has a big day ahead of him at the mansion, so they had to get going. But I think it's a real shame because it was the strongest part of the narrative for me, on the villain side of things. When we finally leave the facility, we fight a giant bat in this church. It's another boss fight that a lot of people really hate, but you shoot your grenade launcher at him a couple times and he's dead. In the church, our protagonist theorized that the main villain could be Marcus's son or grandson, which is quite an interesting theory. Anyways, we get through the facility and we end up in another underground lab. And nothing really significant to the story happens here, except for right at the very end, Billy or Rebecca, whoever you're playing this at the time, they find a cable car. Right when we're about to get the cable car moving, an Eliminator ape comes out of nowhere and knocks Billy over the edge into the abyss. Rebecca continues onward and we go to another lab, but this one is dope because it's the lab from Resident Evil 2. And I've seen complaints about this, but I love this. I love a good callback, so. And this is the only time that we're gonna see anything from Resident Evil 2 or Resident Evil 3 in the same art style as the Resident Evil 1 remake and Resident Evil 0, which I think is my favorite art style in the whole series, but especially in the fixed camera angle days. I think that the backdrops in these games are just beautiful. So it's really cool to see a Resident Evil 2 location in this art style. While we're walking through this area, we run into Enrico, and he decides that he's gonna explore the rest of the Resident Evil 2 lab by himself, which doesn't make any sense because we see him in the first game, and then we know that he didn't report any of his findings from this super secret lab where they're doing, you know, a bunch of no good stuff. I guess, again, the Raccoon City Police Department is just not good at their job. I don't know who the hell they're butting on I mean, this is the Bravo team, so what do you expect, I guess? At this point, the game is starting to get a little messy, and, you know, that's fine. I still love it. When we try to go further down in this giant lab, we have our first run-in with T-001. That's right, the first tyrant, the proto-tyrant. I think that this is a badass enemy, so it gets like 10 points from me just for that. I know we haven't talked about any points at all, but unfortunately for Rebecca, she has to do this fight alone because Billy's still missing. But, you know, quickly we dispose of this guy, and then we keep descending further down, and really not that much longer we find Billy again. And he's just taking a swim, being a lazy piece of garbage. The two reunited, we keep exploring, we fight a bunch of naked zombies, hunters, killer frogs, whatever. It doesn't even matter at this point. We got a magnum, we got a shotgun, we got a custom pistol, and we have hella ammo, so we're just blazing through this place. And I love this lab, but I can understand also getting fatigued from the labs because every Resident Evil game has to end in a lab, it seems. This one's more akin to the Resident Evil 3 Dead Factory than it is like the Resident Evil 2 lab or anything, but either way, it's, I guess, just not for everybody, but it gets 2 thumbs up from this guy. After exploring this place, we finally have the two protagonists go face to face with the opera Final Fantasy singer guy, where he reveals to us he's not Marcus's son, he's not Marcus's grandson. He is James Marcus, which is crazy. I don't even know what else to say about that. He was assassinated. In this cutscene, we see Birkin and William. That's the same guy. We see William and we see Wesker. They show their face right as he's dying because these guys had some beef. After being killed by Spencer's cronies, a leech enters Marcus's body and then just grows for 10 years inside of him and plans revenge, I guess. But immediately after like 10 years of waiting, he's finally here. He reveals his big plan to the two protagonists, and then the leech inside him just kills him. She just takes over, and now instead of James Marcus, you're fighting the Queen Leech. But I mean, sure, I guess. Why the hell not? Billy and Rebecca find out that the Queen Leech hates sunlight, so they use that to stun her, and then Billy shoots her like a badass with like this giant Magnum fucking handgun that he has, and it pierces right through her heart, blows her up. You know the drill at this point. No RPG for early Resident Evil. That's strange. The two escape this facility, and they end up right outside the Spencer mansion. And then Rebecca just lets Billy go. That's fine. But then what does she do? I guess she goes into the Spencer mansion and then just waits for like 12 hours for Chris to show up, and then but she doesn't help him kill any of the zombies inside. She heals him, I guess, if you play as Chris in the first game. But a lot of people have complaints about this. I agree. But it's also like in early 2000s, video game companies didn't give a shit about what they were doing. Look at Metal Gear, look at Zelda. They were just making games and saying, you figure it out. I mean, Kojima probably had it somewhat figured out, but Zelda, Resident Evil, at the end of the day, they're making games to have fun playing. They weren't trying to like make Oppenheimer, you know? I mean, don't get me, it's still silly. It's still valid critiques, you know? I mean, it's super messy, but I guess I just don't really care that much because I had fun playing the game. So just in case I haven't said it enough, I love Resident Evil 0. I think the second half of the game, lore-wise, is a huge mess, but I love the dynamic between Birkin and Wesker. I love that we get to see that, and I also really love Billy's character. Yeah, Rebecca's great too. There's not a bad character in this game besides James Marcus, but that's the main bad guy of the game, I guess. So it does kind of suck that he sucks as a villain. But man, I think that the atmosphere, the environment, the music are just top notch in these two GameCube Resident Evil games. Like genuinely, atmosphere wise, Resident Evil 1 Remake and Resident Evil 0 might be my favorite in the entire series. That's a kind of a bold take when it comes to Resident Evil 0. There's definitely going to be some contenders in the next video, but in this video, for sure, in the first half, these two games absolutely take the cake. But yeah, I didn't feel bored at all exploring any area in this game. The train is, I think, technically probably the best, but I enjoyed all of them, I think, evenly. There's not one that I think is worse than the others. Maybe the mini lab where you find the cable car. That's probably the weakest point in the game for me. But even that, I'm just saying that just to say it. I had fun playing that part too, so. I beat the game in 2 days. It was like non-stop playing it. I personally really liked the gameplay loop of gathering a bunch of items, putting them in each area's like respective main save point location, and then starting over once you get to the next main area. I thought that was awesome. I love that. I think it's a cool way to build suspense, like, oh shit, like, what am I gonna need in the next area? At one point, I left my grenade launcher behind, and then I was like, well, I guess it's just gone for the rest of the game. And technically, you can go back to the very beginning of the game, well, after the train, and gather any item that you left behind at any point in the game. So you don't even really have to play it like that. It would just require a lot of backtracking, which people hate, but it's also Resident Evil. When do you not backtrack? And personally, I just would start over ammo-wise and, use like the grenade launcher for one section of the game and then just not use it again. Because by the end of the game, you have the Magnum and shotgun, and that's really all you need firepower-wise. Because you can make Molotovs. You just don't need every single thing. The only annoying part of that for me was the hook shot because it takes up 2 slots. And you only need it like in the beginning of the game and then like towards the latter half, so it's kind of ridiculous that you have to go back and get it for one little puzzle. And I think in the future games, if I had to choose between an item box or doing it this way, probably gonna choose the item box, but for one journey to do that, I think it's cool. It makes it different. And truly, I think it's one of the highlights of the gameplay for me. Like I said, I didn't really care for the main villain. I thought it was cool that we got James Marcus and more lore added to Spencer. I just wish he wasn't like a generic Walmart brand opera singer. But I mean, a lot of crazy things happen in Resident Evil, so I think maybe that's why I didn't hate it so much. And he's really only in the game for, I think there's like 3 cutscenes with him. So overall, I really don't understand why this game has so much hate when I look online. And granted, online, people just hate, everything seemingly, but I think this game's good. I don't know. Maybe I'm an idiot. Maybe I'm wrong. All right, before I rank this game, let's really try to remember that differing opinions, that's a good thing. We like that. It's fun. You don't want to think the same way I do, and I don't want to think the same way that you do. But truthfully, for me personally, I think Resident Evil 0 fits comfortably right below Resident Evil 2 Remake. Well, with that being said, I'm sorry, but not really. It's just a video game. Who really cares that much, right? If there's anybody who has made it this far in this video, I genuinely appreciate you for hanging out with me this whole time. This video is way too long. It has literally taken me months of my life to play all the games, write the script, do the filming part of it. Editing is gonna take a long time too, so thank you for being here. I'm going to immediately start working on the next video and hopefully have it out shortly after Requiem releases. I am very, very excited to see the connection to Raccoon City after what, like 23 years it's been since the last new adventure set there. It's gonna be dope as hell, I can only imagine. If you want to see where the rest of the saga ranks compared to the classic era, feel free to subscribe. Come hang out with future me, or hang out with past me and watch this video here. I don't know. I had a lot of fun making it, and I don't know, probably be fun to watch too, possibly. Either way, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.